But our deepest spiritual transformation, beloved, occurs when we bring our chaotic internal realities and our roaring anxieties and our deepest fears, our swelling unconscious drives, into the presence of the Triune God of Love and allow him to transform us and make us courageous as we surrender and experience his abundant availability in the tightest of places. Greetings, beloved. Welcome to this edition of On the Living Edge. Dr. Mark Chironna here. Thanks for stopping by. I'm deeply humbled and always encouraged by your desire to hang out with me. I pray that you're blessed. Edge partners, thank you for your faithfulness and your support. You're enabling us not only to reach people in all sorts of places around the world, but enlarge our reach. And God's been up to something really wonderful here recently, and we're just excited about what we're seeing God do, and you're very much a part of it. I pray God richly bless you for your ongoing faithfulness and support. Beloved, we're in a brand new series that I'm calling The Deep Still Point, where I'm taking you on a journey in Psalm 46 to live from a deep core place of direct experience with God. Open your heart, open your mind, open the sacred text to Psalm 46, and let's begin to take a dive to that deep, still point. Beloved, we are in this brand new series, The Deep Still Point, and the entire series is going to be on Psalm 46, one of the Psalms of the sons of Korah. Yeah, the sons of Korah. The dad got a little bit bent out of shape. Moses had to separate him, and then God allowed the earth to swallow him up for lunch. And the sons of Korah learned some lessons out of that, one of them being how to handle rebellion in our own hearts. That's going to come up at some point in our teaching, but there's a lot more we're going to cover about living from the inside out. And so here is Psalm 46 from the New American Standard Version. God is our refuge and strength, a very ready help in trouble. Now, by the way, in the margin, it says abundantly available for help in tight places. We're going to focus on that as well at some point. Therefore, we will not fear though the earth shakes and the mountains slip into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains quake at its swelling pride. There is a river. There's a switch now. We go from this cataclysmic, chaotic scene. All of a sudden, there's a river whose streams make the city of God happy, the holy dwelling places of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She will not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. The nations made an uproar. The kingdoms tottered. Again, there's chaos. He raised his voice. The earth quaked. The Lord of armies is with us. The God of Jacob is our stronghold. Come, behold the works of the Lord, who has inflicted horrific events on the earth. He makes wars to cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and cuts the spear in two. He burns the chariots with fire. Stop striving. Be still. Let go. Relax. And know that I am God. And if I were back in New York City during the days when I was a New York City school teacher, the kids would say, chill out, Dr. Chironna, chilly on out. Be still. Know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted on the earth. The Lord of armies is with us. The God of Jacob is our stronghold. I want to talk, as I said, about the deep still point. That's going to be the overarching umbrella for everything I talk about in this series. So let me read you something that I wrote to help us frame where we're going. The deep still point is that sacred space within us, the place of our truest, God-breathed self, where the now and the nous, the now, present moment, and the nous, which is the ancient Greek term for one aspect of the mind, which they understood as the eye of the heart, where the nous opens us to an immediate and abiding awareness of God. Here, the still small voice of divine presence is not distant, but intimately near as our own breath. This is not just knowing about God, it's knowing God directly, experiencing God not just as with you, but assuredly in you. At the still point, beneath the noise and the turmoil of our daily lives, we find that deep, intuitive way of knowing that transcends ordinary perception. It's a knowing that we slowly learn to honor, to trust, and to yield to, and it shapes our entire being in a posture of attentive openness. It's a quality of attention, beloved, and quiet surrender. In this inward stillness, we become increasingly sensitive to the subtle movements of grace, and we ground our life in the peace of Christ himself, who dwells at the very center of our being. And so when the psalmist opens up with God as our refuge and strength, a very present help, right, in trouble, the opening verse anchors the psalmist's confession of trust explicitly in the person of God. Not in a physical location, not in an object. Yahweh is revealed as what we would say in Latin, the Deus praesens, the God who is immediately present rather than distant. The Hebrew phrase for refuge and strength describes both safety as well as empowerment. Think about that. God, who is a refuge and strength, is that safe place and safe space. He's also the empowering presence in our life. So God is more than a hiding place. God imparts courage and active strength regardless of the crisis we face or the crises we face. The rare expression of all of that intensifies. In other words, he's available for help in tight places. It intensifies the awareness of God's presence. He's abundantly available. He's overwhelmingly accessible, particularly in tight places. His nearness is experiential, it's palpable, and it's urgently available precisely wherever we experience crisis most acutely. So the psalmist echoes what is already said in Psalm 48, verse 9 as well. We have thought on your steadfast love, O God, in the midst of your temple. Very similar here. The concept is the same. There is here an awareness of the memory of God's historical faithfulness in the sons of Korah that undergirds their present trust because of whatever the calamity was that was going on. The proclamation they make is rooted in experiential memory, not optimistic denial. They're going through something. Everything is being shaken. There may have been, historians claim there was some sort of an earthquake. Something was going on at that point in history, and they underwent it. But God proves reliable because he's been faithful in past trouble, and he's the source of their current confidence. Now, from a perspective of what do the signs point to? What do these symbols and signs point to? Chaos symbolizes existential instability. It's not just the literal mountains that are shaking. It's the stuff in life that can shake the core of our being. The earthquake, the trembling earth, the roaring seas represent universal symbols of collapse and uncertainty. The stability once signified by mountains and the earth is subverted in the psalm, signifying the breakdown of our human assumptions about predictability, which is something we love, predictability, don't we? Because we can be in control. And order. These images speak prophetically, believe it or not, to our modern anxieties, pandemics, climate upheaval, societal disruptions, and they reveal the instability of human-made foundations. The assurance that God is our refuge counters the signs of the chaos by offering a divine symbol of ultimate stability and order in the presence of disorder. Now, let's talk about that from the inside out, from a perspective of our insides. The images of natural upheaval, I would argue, mirror our unconscious fears and anxieties. Roaring waters reflect our overwhelming emotions. Not that you have them, but those of us that are Italian and dysfunctional, we have them often. Suppressed trauma can be represented here. Inner turbulence that surfaces unexpectedly, threatening our sense of internal security. Listen, beneath surface stability lies an inner world filled with powerful impulses, anxieties, and often they're hidden, yet they're capable of sudden and unsettling emergence. And it's like the guy that said, Lord, I lost my temper. And God says, no, son, you just found it, right? Things just erupt. And so what we don't want to do when these kind of upheavals happen inside us, this is very unhealthy psychologically. You don't want to resist what's going on because you're going to give it more power. You want to consciously surrender your heart to God so that those deeper fears and those emotional upheavals are held out front in the presence of God. Don't run from them. Don't resist them in that sense. Accept the fact that you're experiencing something very human and very real. Doesn't mean there's not spiritual warfare involved. That's not what I'm saying. But you don't want to deny the reality of what's going on. You want to be able to see what's going on and face it down. And so when we think about all of that, we're talking about tight places inside us and moments when life's pressures intensify beyond our ability to seemingly cope. We've all been through that. And learning how to confront our human limitations and our vulnerabilities without letting what's confronting them overtake us. That's important. All of us are vulnerable. All of us are limited. But when stuff gets stirred up that challenges us to the point where we realize, I don't have what it takes, we do, but we have to take a step back and recognize we're not in this alone. God is. And it's the isness of God, as one preacher once said, that we need to rely on. The isness. God is a very present help. And so the experience of tight places or crises that are tight is felt directly and viscerally. You feel it in your body. You go through tension, it's going to register somewhere, if not everywhere, in your body. And so we experience anxiety bodily. It's an actual bodily experience. We can get a tightening in our chest. We can get tightness in our stomach. Our breathing can be constricted. We can have an unsettling sense in our gut. All of that. Crisis isn't merely something you can intellectualize. It's something you experience in your body. That's why we call feelings, because you feel them in your body. Emotions are that which go on in the mind. Feelings are in the body for the most part. And so when the psalmist says, in light of all that, God is a very present help, he's talking about it in relation to your and my embodied experience. Don't divorce the fact that God's with you in the stress. Recognize one of the most important things we can come to terms with when we're dealing with that level of stress, beloved, is to realize that the body needs to process it and shake it off. But you're not in the shaking alone. God's with you in it. So let your body go through what it's going to go through. Let it pass through you as you pray it through in God's presence. You and I inevitably find ourselves in tight places more often than we care to admit, especially in the current culture. And because of that, the text wants to remind us that there are certain things that can terrify us. Collapsing mountains, quaking earth, roaring waters, the experience of life unraveling at the seams, touching us at our very core. And listen, that is a mirror reflection at times of what's going on inside. And it's really not unusual. It happens more often than we care to admit. You know, when I was going through my profoundly dark season, I will never forget. And I had to preach my way through that storm. And it was a long storm. But I would often ask the congregation, how many of you are feeling this? And I was shocked that more often than not, 90% of the congregation would put their hands up. So even though I was going through what I was going through, the people that were in the congregation were going through similar things. Overwhelmment. Listen to this word, overwhelmment, refers to the experience when our emotions, our anxieties, and those hidden unconscious forces surge inside us with intensity. And so much so that our conscious minds struggle to cope and remain stable. When deeply buried feelings, memories, fears, or desires suddenly flood our awareness, they can make us feel as though we're being submerged or drowned in forces that we can't manage or understand. That overwhelmment reveals itself through intense anxiety, confusion, okay? When you're confused, don't try to unconfuse yourself. Look at it as a combination of feelings and thoughts that will pass as you learn to observe them and hold them before the Lord without trying to analyze them. Analyzing them can get you deeper stuck in you remember the Chinese finger traps at the circus? The harder you try to get out, the more difficult it becomes. And so confusion is part of the package. Emotional paralysis. Panic attacks. They signal the activation of something unresolved deep in our hearts and at an unconscious level. And it could be an old wound, it could be an old trauma, or some unrecognized inner conflict that's been triggered recently that you haven't been able to resolve. So pastorally, I would tell you that overwhelmment, it doesn't mean you're weak, it means you're human, right? And let it become, here's what you need to realize. You want to let the overwhelmment become an invitation. I would argue that when it comes, it's a call to pause, to listen deeply and carefully, and courageously bring those overwhelming feelings to speech in the presence of the God who loves you and is never going to fail you or forsake you. Name them as best as you can. Explore that naming in the presence of Jesus and allow him by the Spirit to sort it out as you keep praying and integrate it so you can be transformed. God is already abundantly available to us within the overwhelming chaos itself. We just have to remind ourselves of that. He doesn't merely comfort us from afar. He stands immediately and intimately present within our deepest sense of fear and our emotional upheaval. He's with us when we suffer. The Spirit wants to teach us how to see all of these crises, not merely as threats, listen carefully, but as openings. Openings. Critical moments where we honestly face our inner struggles and allow them into God's healing presence rather than repressing or stuffing them further. What you bury alive stays alive. It's time for us when these things happen to allow the Father of lights, the Father of spirits, and the Father of glory to become our refuge as our greater point of emotional stability in the presence of our emotional vulnerability. So the sons of Korah are saying to us not to move toward denial or escapism, but toward courageous movement in the divine presence, awaiting within the very anxieties that are terrifying us, the fears that are assailing us, and the inner storms that won't calm down. Listen, psychologically, we call that process sublimation. Sublimation is the process of honestly facing and becoming aware of our deep desires, our impulses, and our inner tensions. They are powerful energies within us that can drive our behavior. Rather than burying or ignoring them, we have to acknowledge their presence openly before God. And as we yield those inner realities in trust to God's grace, we make room for God's transforming work. In that cooperation, beloved, God graciously redirects those negative, afflictive emotions and energies from harmful or unhelpful directions toward wholeness and purpose. God brings them through the cross by the Spirit as we cooperate. Sublimation, then, is our willingness to own what's within us and place it honestly in the hands of the Lord, trusting that his love and his wisdom can shape something life-giving in all of it. So then he says, therefore we will not fear, though the earth should move, etc., the mountains dip into the heart of the sea. Mountains, this is cosmic collapse, by the way, this whole thing. Mountains are supposed to be permanent and reliable until there's a major earthquake, right? God's stability in comparison to what's violently disrupted is important. The earth itself, traditionally understood as stable, is here pictured as undergoing radical upheaval. Those images evoke deep, deep unrest, but they need to evoke deep theological reflection. God created order, and yet we can not realize that even order in the natural can be vulnerable to chaos. But God himself is untouched by any of those collapses. So mountains slipping into the heart of the sea symbolize the dismantling of what we perceive as secure and unchangeable. Cultural norms, political systems, cherished traditions. The imagery signifies crisis so intense that basic assumptions about security and normalcy dissolve, inviting us to reconsider, where's my anchor? What's holding me fast? The mountains represent structures of identity within us we've painstakingly built. Our egos, our constructed roles, our images, our beliefs about ourselves and our place in the world. When those foundations seem to tremble or collapse due to trauma, due to loss, due to some crisis, we experience deep internal disorientation and a loss of a sense of perspective about who we are. All of that happens in the shaking. These upheavals expose our hidden self, breaking through surface stability and revealing our deeper anxieties, our fears, and our conflicts that are normally contained below our conscious awareness. But what the Spirit wants to do, beloved, is help us understand these moments again as opportunities. When our inner mountains, our ego defenses, our rigid beliefs, our suppressed memories collapse into chaos, previously buried beneath truth's surface, it's painful yet potentially healing. Let me say that again. It's painful, but it's potentially healing, depending on how we respond to it. Because God's grace works precisely in our vulnerability, inviting us to authentic transformation. The transformational journey I've shared with you before is very simple. Death, burial, resurrection. It's a symbolic 3-day journey. And so that lived experience can be a lived experience where you move from the anxiety until your fears melt into peace. And so mountains slipping, sudden loss, painful betrayal, severe illness, radical disorientation, you name it. It's all included under those powerful, negative, chaotic images. But even though the waters roar and foam, the mountains quake at the swelling pride, all of those things, the roaring, the foaming that we experience without and within, you and I need to realize that while they can invoke intense sensory unrest, God's presence is not a distant consolation. He is Jehovah Shammah, the Lord who is there. Immediate support can be experienced even in the most hellish of storms, and it can be felt all the way into our bodily distress. That's how good God is. Now, the storm may linger for a little bit longer than we expect, but Jesus will still the storm. We intimately, all of us, understand the roaring, the foaming waters, the emotional crisis, the floods, the traumas we can't contain. We understand all of those. But our deepest spiritual transformation, beloved, occurs when we bring our chaotic internal realities and our roaring anxieties and our deepest fears, our swelling unconscious drives, into the presence of the Triune God of Love and allow him to transform us and make us courageous as we surrender and experience his abundant availability in the tightest of places. Beloved, as always, when we get to this point in our presentation, you know this is your invitation to help us to continue to do what we're doing all around the world, because we can't do it without you. Thank you in advance for your love and your generous gifts. This month, for your love gift of $32, I want to put in your hands this brand new series. It's insightful, it's enriching, it's revelatory, and it will bring you to that deep, still, small point. Your love gift of $32 will go a long way to help us continue to do what we're doing. You can have this series in CD, DVD, or MP3, your choice. Thank you. If you're moved on to sow a love gift of $52, I have an additional 4-message series that you can also have in CD, DVD, or MP3, Desiring Jesus, Abiding in him. It's all about the theology of abiding in Christ and all the dynamics involved in facilitating a life of abiding in the one who abides in us. It's rich. You won't be disappointed. I promise it'll be well worth your while to add it to your learning library. And you can have that along with the Still Point series for $52. And finally, if you're moved on to sow a love gift of $72, I want to put in your hands a 2.5-hour webinar that will literally open up the world of stillness, silence, beholding, and contemplation, called the Sacred Pause. It's an immersion experience of 2.5 hours into the sacred ancient practices of stillness, silence, beholding, and contemplation. And it's laced with prayers beginning to end where we engage the presence of Jesus. Sow your best love gift right now, 32, 52, or 72. Let me say thank you for continuing to help us by putting these precious gifts into your hand. Sow now, call now, and guess what? Beloved, I am super excited. You know, I've written over 30 some odd books. Probably the most important one that I've written is just about to be released, and you can pre-order it on Amazon. It is called Prophetic Integrity and the Elijah Legacy. It's the first in a trilogy that I promise is going to be life-changing. So glad for the fact that Chosen Books has chosen to put it out, but I promise you won't be disappointed. Pre-order it on Amazon. Thank you for sowing. Thank you for participating. May God bless you richly. Sow now, call now.